he and his wife came back from somebody's house, and they saw up on the hill across from their house what looked like a house with all these lights on it. So we said, oh, that must be a new house up there, fairly close. But we never noticed it before. And she said, yeah. Well, he said, well, maybe there was a lot of trees in front. They cut the trees down. And they looked at it, you know, and it bothered them. They worried about it. And then they decided to go in the house. Well, he came out with the binoculars and looked. And he could see these vertical windows. And the thing was putting out a lot of light. And since he didn't know what to do, he went to bed. But when they woke up in the morning, the first thing they both did was to race outside in daylight and look at the house on the hill that they hadn't noticed before. And of course, it's just a blank hill. There's nothing there. But there were lots of sightings going on up there. And what fascinated me was how people were able to somehow, you know, deal with them by just getting rid of them. Now, we hear a lot of people saying, why aren't there more photographs and so on? I had been talking to the editor of the local newspaper up there in Provincetown and his wife. He wrote most of the copy and she wrote a lot of the copy and she took all the photographs. They were driving along the same stretch of highway that I was driving along when I had my sighting. And this is maybe 3 or 4 weeks later, and they knew about my sighting. And she said to me later, she said, we looked out to the left and we saw this big blinking light right over the water, not very far up. She said maybe 30 feet up from the surface. And she said, what's that? Her husband's driving. He said, no, what is that thing? And he continued looking up the road and then looking there. She said, what is it? And suddenly it wasn't there anymore. And she decided, gee, she has all the camera equipment on the back seat. She'll just reach around and get the camera after the thing left. And she said, how could I, as a newspaper photographer, have let this thing get away? And of course, I was beginning to see how, as these things happen to people, there are just so many ways that you cannot face it, you don't want to face it, you don't want to deal with it. Now, to go on a little bit in some of the UFO issues that I cover in the book, when I talked about the George O'Barkley case, that was a case that really got me investigating for the very first time, because when I had the sighting in '64, I didn't do anything about it. I just began reading, looking at television accounts and so forth. And I simply didn't have the idea that I was going to ever investigate anything. But the man who had the liquor store across the street from me told me about this thing that came down out of the sky and scared him half to death and so on. It's a story that's been told many, many times. This happened where he was, as he was driving home from his liquor store, on the New Jersey Palisades right across from Manhattan. Ironically, this landing of a UFO, which it turned out to be, was small figures who came out of it and dug the soil samples. That took place about 3 miles from the headquarters of the New York Times. You know, so much for the fact that this doesn't ever occur, and it's always in the back seat of the pickup truck or something, according to the wits. But at any rate, one of the things that happened is the second witness in that case, my friend was driving his car when this thing passed his car at 60 feet away, and he was going very slowly, completely terrified as these little figures came out. He said they looked like kids in snowsuits. And I have since seen that, the same description in 2 or 3 other occupant reports. But at any rate, there was a second witness who I located, who was he was the doorman of the building right across the street from where this took place. And I rustled up this witness by myself by going down. I knew that there wasn't an all-night doorman in this building since a collector of mine had bought a big painting of mine, and this, ironically, was the only apartment building in New Jersey I'd ever been in. And here this event happened across the street. So I went down to see if the doorman had seen anything, and when I finally located him, it took a while, because he had changed jobs. He described what he'd seen, and the lights, the exact location, and so forth. But anyway, this just has to do with George Obarski, who was the basic witness, the man who had the liquor store. He was a very charming, crotchety old guy, a real old crotchety New Yorker. As I say in the book, the kind of guy who'd seen it all and hated most of it. But he had to ask me what UFO stood for. He didn't know those things, and he had no idea that I was interested. But at any rate, George allowed his name to be used when I wrote an article for the incident in the Village Voice, and it was the first time I'd ever written anything on this. It was 1976, very early, and oddly enough, the article was picked up and reprinted in Cosmopolitan magazine, and I've told people since then that I found my UFO article sandwiched in between two articles in Cosmopolitan, one on how to have an orgasm and the other what to wear on your first date. It covers the magazine, I think.